Okay. So, I'm gonna do a really casual video today. Oh, let's turn the master volume down a little bit. So I'm actually doing this dungeon live, and I just kind of wanted to talk about my feelings about the Shadowbringers story. And it might be a little rambly. I have like some points on my other monitor that I'm gonna kind of try and talk about and try and do the dungeon at the same time. So it's super casual video, not like my last one at all. And I'm just gonna talk about my feelings towards the story and what I think about it. See if I can multitask, huh? I'm playing a red mage, so it's super easy. Needless to say, I assume everyone watching this has seen all of the story points for Shadowbringers now. 5.3 just came out, what, like a week ago, I think? And I just really want to talk about it. And I thought about making like a really kind of strict script and just read from it and make it super polished. But I think it'll be a more natural reaction if I just kind of talk about it like this. So, if you haven't finished the story, go finish the story. If you haven't played Final Fantasy XIV, go play Final Fantasy XIV. It's so good. So, my thoughts on the Shadowbringers story. I feel like it's really a story about Emmett and the Ascian history, the story of the Crystal Exarch, and the story of Ardbert and the Warriors of Light. And I'm just going to go through each of those things and talk about what I liked and didn't like about it. Again, multitasking, trying to kill stuff. Emmett is my favorite character probably in the entire game. Emmett Selk, the Ascian. I just love him so much, and I was really surprised actually, because when we first got introduced to Emmett, in like the last cinematic of Stormblood or something like that, he was super, super crazy. Like, his voice actor is amazing and made him seem so nutso, right? And they turned him into like the most relatable, likable villain like ever. Like, I can't think of a villain that I just enjoy as much as I enjoy Emmett, because he's so like he's not really funny, but he kind of has this kind of dry humor about him, and you went in assuming the voice actor did such a good job of making him seem so nutso the first time that we saw him. And most of our interactions with the Ascians have made them seem so kind of boring. Like with Laha Breha. Laha Breha, I know they said Laha Breha is unlike all the other Ascians and all that, but he was who we mostly had interactions with as far as Ascians went, and they just seem very generic, very, haha, I'm evil, and we must, you know, destroy the light, and we have Laha Breha's big speech at the end of Praetorium about, you know, talking about Hydaelyn and the light being a what's the word I'm looking for? A parasite, yes, like a parasite, you know? Very one-dimensional villains that weren't really interesting, and then Emmett comes along. And at first he's nutso. And then we meet him, and he just starts hanging out with us. And at first you're like, what are we doing? Like, why are we hanging out with an Ascian? And just like having normal conversations with him, but I mean, it becomes apparent that there's nothing really we can do about it. Like, he can just teleport away, right? So it just gets into this very interesting dynamic where this villain is hanging out with us for some reason. And, oh, we're gonna die. But there's nothing we can do about it, so all of our characters are just like, alright, I guess this is normal now. And then we start talking to him, and he starts telling us about his history and his Omniasian's history, and it just becomes such a interesting dynamic, where he just straight up like tells our characters, yeah, I don't believe that you're alive, so it's not murder when I kill you. And he just kind of nonchalantly says that, which I thought was great. And all of our characters are just kind of glaring at him at that point. But he's like, "What? That's just the way it is." And I thought that was wonderful. And even though, because we had that conception of him being nuts, and then having so many like heartfelt conversations with him along the journey of the initial story, you just get to love him so much. And then at the very end, when we finally beat him in our final confrontation with him, he kind of trusts us too. He's like, when he says, "Remember us, remember that we existed," and he leaves us with a smile. That was just like, you felt for him, even though you knew that he was still a little bit nuts, but you understood his perspective a little bit more. They did a wonderful job of making him a very sympathetic character. So I think Emmett and his voice actor made Shadowbringers what it is. He was my favorite character, by far. And then, if we talk about the Crystal Exarch, because like I said, I think Shadowbringers is a story about Emmett, the Crystal Exarch, and the Warriors of Light and Ardbert. I love this dungeon, by the way, all the smooth jazz. In my other video, when I mentioned, have you ever done a dungeon to smooth jazz, this is the one I was talking about. So the Crystal Exarch, very much a story about him as well. And let's be honest, unless you didn't do the Crystal Tower, everyone knew that it was G'rahatia, right? Like, that wasn't really a twist. Everyone knew it. We were just wondering how the characters were going to react to it. I love in the beginning of the expansion, I remember this, where you first meet him and you first get teleported to the First, and you're like, "Have you ever heard of G'rahatia?" And he's like, "G'rahatia? Never heard of him." And then he just keeps talking or whatever. G'rahatia, or the Crystal Exarch, whatever you want to call him, I think the player base has a lot of different feelings about him. There's a lot of Reddit posts about how they're question whether G'rahatia is in love with the player character, with all the heartfelt talks that we have, and hanging out by a mountain with him, and him asking for to go on an adventure with us and everything. And then there's his relationship with the bunny captain. I forgot her name. I'm sorry. Where both of them love each other, and both of them kind of know that they love each other, but it's not like a romantic love. And I think a lot of people, because we're so used to the generic romance story that we kind of look for everywhere, and when it's not a romance, but it's still highly emotional, I think a lot of people have a hard time kind of grasping that. Do you know what I mean? I think the Crystal Exarch represents more of like a childlike innocence. And I think he's probably asexual, which means he just doesn't see people that way. And I think that innocence, people have a hard time grasping. But I think he's just a character that just loves everyone very much, in a very platonic way. I always mess up this boss, by the way. And me talking while trying to do this boss, I'm going to mess it up even more. Let's get some buffs going. Okay. And his story is kind of a... I'm going to get hit by everything. Trying to talk and do this at the same time. Yeah, look at that. Literally hit by everything. So he, I think he represents a very childlike innocence, but also a, kind of the opposite of what I think Ardbert kind of represents. So, like, I think Ardbert represents a kind of loss and then regaining of faith, or hope, or whatever you want to call it. And I think the Crystal Exarch, he's... I don't want to say hopelessness, but the Crystal Exarch, I'm just gonna die, yeah. I can't do this and talk at the same time. The Crystal Exarch knows his plan is for him to die. He knows that he is going to die. He knows that he's going to do it. He knows that it's the right thing to do, and he does it for us, or everyone in the Crystarium. Oh, what's the thing? And he's kind of come to terms with it, and he's sad about that, but he's kind of given up on the idea of anything else. And we... Oh, I was not in that. Literally hit by every single mechanic in this fight. This is killing. Okay. That was horrible. He's given up on all of that, and we kind of show him that there's kind of always hope. And that's kind of what his story is like, that even if things seem like there's no way out, there's always a way out. It's a very hopeful kind of message. And then there's Ardbert. I have mixed feelings about Ardbert. So first things first, I love Ardbert. Ardbert is wonderful. And like I just mentioned a second ago, I think his story is more a story of loss of faith or hope, and then regaining that hope. Because he's when we first meet him, he's kind of given up. Like, he's trapped. There's no way for him to do anything or feel anything anymore. And by traveling with us and helping free the kind of the souls of all of his comrades, he regains that. The reason that... The thing that kind of bugs me at Ardbert, okay, is we were introduced to him back at the tail end of Heaven's Ward, right? Pretty sure it was Heaven's Ward. And his story was so bad in Heaven's Ward. And remember when, like, we didn't even know his name in Heaven's Ward. He was just like, I am the warrior of darkness. And then he goes away, and that was it. It was just a big waste of time in Heaven's Ward. And, like, people, like, I streamed everything, and so his, like, people on the stream which was telling me, oh yeah, everything comes together eventually. It was still bad. Like, it doesn't matter if they use the character later. By the way, later was years in between. I played it all in one kind of playthrough, so it was only a few months for me. But, like, the player base at the end of Heaven's Ward to the beginning of Shadowbringers was years. Like, you have to wait years for this character to actually mean anything. I would have been... like I said, I love Ardbert. He's great. I would have loved him just as much if I was introduced to him, if I met him in the beginning of Shadowbringers, rather than if I had a bad story with him at the end of Heavensward. Like, it wouldn't have made any difference, and I probably would have actually been more open to liking him and liking him sooner if I didn't have this negative connection with him because of the end of Heavensward. So that's why I'm kind of like a little annoyed by the way they did the story with it. And that was fun. Seeing all of his exploits with all of the Warriors of Light. I did all of those stories, by the way. I leveled up all 4 of the roles for the role class storylines. Now initially, I'm already on the last boss, okay. Initially, I was going to talk about kind of the ending of... Whoops, I am completely messed up. Pressing my buttons and all the wrong buttons trying to talk at the same time. Initially I was going to talk about the ending here, but I kind of wanted to talk about something else, and that's what I think what Final Fantasy XIV does so well, so much better than just about any other game. Nope. I'm just gonna hit everybody, it's fine. What I think Final Fantasy XIV does better than just about any other game is creating an emotional moment that sticks with you and is super powerful. And I'm going to give 4 examples of that. Am I going to make it? I'm going to make it. 4 of my favorite examples, and 3 of them are from Shadowbringers. So, the first super emotional, such a good moment is going to be the final fight with Nidhogg. I loved Heavensward. Heavensward is super good. And when we finally get that final fight with Nidhogg, and we're waiting in the queue, and the music, the Dragon Song music is playing, and our character walks slowly toward Nidhogg on the steps of, what's it called? The Steps of Faith? The Final Steps? I forget what the bridge is called. That was such a powerful moment, and it was so good. And that's the first time I was really, like, in love with the story of this game. Where am I going to stand? I'm going to stand right here. And overcap. I'm playing awful, by the way. So, that's my first part, where everything was just perfect. And then, after that... the final fight with Emmett at the conclusion of the initial story of Shadowbringers, when all of us kind of came together and we kind of fused with Arbert's soul and Emmett himself, and then the music. It was just such an emotionally tense motion, and it was perfect. I can't think of how they could have done that any better. The third part, I'm gonna go here. Okay, the third part would be the ending cutscene for this patch, 5.3. And I feel like I have to apologize to my group for playing so awful this dungeon run. The ending for 5.3. Oh, there's a pet. Let's need the pet. This is a good enough place. Oh, I got the pet. That's nice. Okay. This is actually a good place to kind of hang out when I talk. So the ending of 5.3, not the ending of, like, the fight, but the ending cutscene. Because I had this conversation with Sayo the other day, where I think Heaven's Ward I loved, but Heaven's Ward was very much a kind of a tragedy. It was a tragic story because we had multiple characters dying, and at the end of the climax of the Heaven's Ward story, when we beat Nidhogg, and we're trying to save Estinian from being possessed by Nidhogg, and we're trying to pull the eyes out, and the spirits of our friends, help us do that. You have Ysael and you have Honchefant at our sides. Their spirits at our sides as we're pulling the eyes from Estinian's armor. It's very much a bittersweet moment, and it was really, really good. Whereas there were definitely bittersweet moments in Shadowbringers, but the very end of Shadowbringers, the very end cutscene, when we see the camera panning up to see Grahatia's face, and he's okay, and he just like I said before, he knew that he was going to die. He knew that that was his role, and there was no hope for him. And then to see Grahatia there with us, not crystallized, completely healthy, free to do whatever he wants, and of course he wants to be a scion. It was such a happy, faith restored, hope restored moment, and that was really, really good. That was awesome. And then the fourth example that I'm going to have of like a highly kind of emotionally charged moment is going to be different from the other ones. So the other ones, the final fight with Nidhogg, the final fight with Emmett, and the final cutscene of 5.3, all of those are meant to be super emotional. The music, everything is tailored to reach in and pull these emotions out of us. But Final Fantasy XIV and Shadowbringers especially has more subtle ways of doing that too. And the example I'm going to talk about, I'm actually going to leave just because I love the victory music, but not all the time. Before we went on our final confrontation with Emmett, when we're in the rebuilt Amarat, we talked with Reen, I believe it was, and I forget the exact question that Reen asks, but I think it was basically like we the main characters at that point were kind of dying, and Reen asks us a question. I think it was like, how do we continue on? How do we still have hope? How do we keep doing that? And you have, I think, 3 options of how to respond to Reen, but I think there's only one correct option, and that would be a smile better suits a hero. And of course, those are the words of Honchefant when Honchefant is dying in our arms. And that one choice, it's not, the music is just the normal Amarat music. There's no voice acting, there's no any of that. But just being able to pick that choice just brings so much emotion to the forefront, in such a simple but effective way. It was so good. Like, just being able to pick that choice really made a lot of it for me. So that's what I mean when I say, like, Final Fantasy XIV is so good at creating emotional moments, and I love it. It's so good. This Shadowbringers has been great. If I were to have any critiques of the story of Shadowbringers, it's so MMOs, and when I say MMOs, I mostly mean WoW and Final Fantasy XIV, because those are the 2 MMOs I've played the most. It's really easy kind of expansion idea-wise to be like, oh, there's another planet or another dimension or something like that. We're going to go there and we're going to spend the expansion there. The overall story, I feel like kind of doesn't do well with that because it the overall if you were to summarize the story simply, it doesn't really do much. Because think about this. At the end of Stormblood, where were we? The Empire was attacking. What's his face? Xenos was the big bad, and tensions were high. We didn't know what was going to happen. Wind. And now we're at the end of Shadowbringers, and what's happening? The Empire isn't attacking, but tensions are still high, and the big bad is Xenos. We were off in another world, doing other things. We come back, and we still have the same problems that we had at the end of Stormblood. So even though a lot has happened, we're back where we started. And I feel like there's a better way to do it than that. You know, everything in Shadowbringers was great. I love Shadowbringers way more than Stormblood. Don't get me wrong. It was a great contained story, but as far as where the world is going, it felt a little weird that we've done all of these things and we've done nothing. You know, like you can say something like, "Oh yeah, all of the main Ascians are gone, but we're still gonna be dealing with other Ascians." Xenos is quote unquote an Ascian now, and then there's that new character, I forgot his name. Did they even tell us his name? The guy who possessed the guy we already killed. We're back where we started. Nothing's really changed. As far as the grand thing goes. So if I were to make any critiques, that kind of annoys me, but the contained story within Shadowbringers was so good and so well done that I don't really mind. It's just something to think about. So yeah, my conclusions are I friggin' love Shadowbringers. It's really, really good. A really, really wonderful job of making us really attached to villains. They did a really good job of making the Ascians seem somewhat relatable, when before Shadowbringers they just weren't. Before Shadowbringers they were very generic, haha, I'm evil, I'm going to destroy the world kind of deal. And now we feel like, no, we understand what their motivations were. We understand why we had to fight them. It was great. Really, really good. So, hopefully you guys didn't mind this really casual, kind of rambly, really rambly video format. Tell me what you think. Do you agree with my feelings towards Shadowbringers, or am I full of shit? Tell me in the comments.